Hello and welcome back to the Advanced Learner Studio. I'm your host. This is the space where we really try to do more than just, skim the surface. We're all about intellectual excavation, getting into the underlying currents, the psychological frameworks that really govern achievement. And our mission today, it's a big one. We want to give you, our global audience, the tools to not just find success, but to actually architect it.
It really is incredible to connect with this global tapestry of cultures and perspectives, all of you coming together with this shared goal of mastering not just the English language, but these really complex ideas. So in this deep dive, our objective is to really dissect the psychology behind setting goals. And it's indispensable role in our long-term personal evolution. We're trying to move beyond just surface-level motivation.
Right, into something more like structural discipline.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's start with a little bit of a cognitive provocation, an arresting thought experiment, if you will, that I think gets right to the heart of this. I want you to picture yourself, say, exactly 1 year from now, 12 months from this very moment, and you're doing a kind of rigorous self-audit. You're looking back at the last year, at the landscape of your life, professionally, psychologically. And what if you discover that you are fundamentally in the exact same place?
That's a powerful thought. And for a lot of high-achieving people, which I know our listeners are, that's a genuinely disconcerting, maybe even scary premise. And what's so often missed in that scenario is that stagnation. It's rarely because of a lack of talent.
Right. It's not that you weren't smart enough.
Not at all. And it's usually not because there was a dearth of opportunities out there. Much, much more frequently, this kind of profound stasis, it just comes from a persistent failure to commit decisively to a clear direction.
And that idea is, it's just so critical because, look, time passes for everyone. It's this universal, relentless constant. It happens whether you do anything or not. But progress is something else entirely. It's the exclusive domain of those who deliberately choose their destination and then engineer their route to get there. The world simply doesn't reward passive wishing.
That intentional design, that engineering you mentioned, that is the absolute central challenge we're tackling today. We're trying to move past the fleeting idea of a New Year's resolution. That's why we're calling this deep dive 2026, the architecture of achievement. The whole focus is on building a robust, a resilient structure for success, and we're using advanced psychological models as our building materials.
There's this common misconception out there that setting goals is.
Yeah.
It's a practice for the hyper-ambitious only, for the titans of industry or people doing these heroic feats of productivity.
But the reality is just so much more fundamental than that. Goals are, I would argue, an intrinsic human necessity. They furnish our existence with a sense of purpose, with direction, and they give us this profound, stabilizing feeling that our daily efforts, whether that's a small act of studying a language or a huge professional project, that they're not in vain. A really well-defined goal can transform what feels like mundane effort into something deeply meaningful.
Okay, so we're establishing the intellectual foundation needed for that kind of sustained achievement. And that's going to require some real structural, systematic thinking. So let's unpack that. Where do we start? Let's begin with that foundational mindset, the bedrock of this whole architecture.
Right. So the human mind has this really interesting cognitive mechanism, and the start of a new year triggers it perfectly. Psychologists, behavioral scientists, they call this the temporal landmark, or, more informally, the clean slate phenomenon.
Can you elaborate on that a bit? Because I think we all feel that burst of motivation on January 1st, but it often doesn't last. So why does our brain treat a calendar date as this genuine break in continuity?
That is the essential question, isn't it? A temporal landmark, and it could be a birthday, the start of a new job, or January 1st. It's a moment that the brain cognitively separates from the rest. It creates this perceived break. The past, with all its, failures and missed goals, suddenly feels hermetically sealed. It's quarantined off from the future. And the future, in contrast, just seems to unfurl like this unwritten, pristine manuscript. It's full of pure possibility.
So the kind of useful cognitive bias then, it lets us wipe the slate clean without actually having to change our entire lives. And it's this psychological reset that gives us the power to pause, to really look inward and to ask that crucial question, are we living with intention? Or are we just stuck in a state of perpetual reaction, just reacting to emails, to demands, to whatever the world throws at us?
And if you only react, you just sort of survive the year. You never intentionally build it. Exactly. And that idea of intentionality brings us directly to the incredible work of Stanford psychologist Carol Dweck. Her work on mindset. The difference between the people who successfully use that temporal landmark for real, sustained growth and those who just fall back into the old patterns. It very often comes down to this one psychological orientation.
Okay, so let's define the two poles she identifies. On one hand, you have people with a fixed mindset. They tend to see their core abilities, their intelligence, their talent, even something like language skill, as fixed, immutable, as if they were carved in stone at birth.
Right. And the implication of that fixed view is it's profound, especially in how it affects behavior when you face a challenge. Someone with a fixed mindset will tend to shy away from real challenges. And why is that? Because a real challenge brings with it the risk of failure. And for the fixed mindset, failure isn't just a temporary setback. It's seen as this devastating exposure of their inherent, unchangeable limits. Their whole identity is tied up in being naturally good at something.
So the minute they have to actually try hard, it feels like a confession of weakness, and they just stop.
Precisely. Now, on the other hand, you have those who cultivate a growth mindset. They see challenges not as threats, but as crucibles, as opportunities for learning, for adaptation, for expansion. They operate from this robust belief that intelligence, skills, linguistic ability, none of it is static. It's all malleable. It can be developed through deliberate, sustained effort and perseverance.
For them, the effort itself is the sign of engagement. It's a sign of strength, not a sign that you're not smart enough to begin with.
Exactly. And for an advanced English learner, especially someone who's targeting C2 proficiency, that level of nuance, of idiomatic expression, this distinction is just utterly transformative. That internal monologue you have with yourself governs so much of your actual learning outcome.
Oh, absolutely. Just think about that little self-limiting voice in your head. The fixed mindset whispers, my accent is just fundamentally poor. I've tried for years, but I'll never sound like a native speaker. It must be a neurological thing.
Yeah.
And that belief, it becomes this self-imposed barrier that's far more restrictive than any actual external limitation.
But the growth mindset offers this immediate, powerful, and frankly, empirically grounded comeback. It says, my pronunciation, my intonation. It can absolutely be refined with consistent, targeted practice. Every time I stumble over a word or misuse an idiom, that mistake is not a verdict on my intelligence. It's a free, high-resolution data point for improvement. It shows me exactly where I need to focus my practice next.
And we should probably introduce another concept here from Albert Bandura, self-efficacy. Because the growth mindset gives you the belief framework, but self-efficacy, that's the engine. It's the belief in your own capacity to actually execute the behaviors you need to.
That's a great point. It's one thing to believe growth is possible. It's another to believe you can do it. Self-efficacy is the conviction that you can organize and execute the sequence of actions required to get something done. So a fixed mindset might even believe, oh, I could learn that if I tried, but then low self-efficacy kicks in and says, but I just can't organize my life to find 3 hours to study.
Whereas the growth mindset, when it's combined with high self-efficacy, says something totally different. It says, I may not understand this complex grammar point right now, but I know I have the capacity, the organizational skill, and the persistence to dedicate 30 minutes to it until it becomes second nature.
So this new year, 2026, it's not magical in and of itself. Its only power is its potential to be a catalyst for this essential paradigm shift in your psychological orientation. Once you truly internalize that progress is not just possible, but probable, with sustained, structured effort, your entire way of seeing the world changes.
You stop seeing the destination, fluency, as some distant, unreachable shore that depends on luck or genius. And instead, you start focusing only on optimizing the very next manageable step.
And that change in focus allows you to see and to exploit all these little opportunities for micro improvements that were just invisible to you before. You stop waiting for some grand breakthrough and you start optimizing your daily systems.
This brings us to a really critical distinction between just wishful thinking and what we might call pragmatic optimism. We're definitely not advocating for some naive belief that success is guaranteed and effortless. That kind of optimism is incredibly fragile. It shatters at the first sign of pressure.
Pragmatic optimism is different. It's a robust confidence that's rooted in evidence and logic. It's the belief that your sustained efforts are a meaningful investment that will yield a measurable return, even if that return isn't always linear. It requires you to understand, fundamentally, that setbacks are not damning indictments of your ability. They're just inevitable, predictable parts of any ambitious journey.
And this is where we hit one of the most counterintuitive findings from studies of expert performance across every field imaginable, from music to sports to science. And that is consistency trumps intensity every single time. without exception.
And that is such a difficult truth for high achievers to internalize in our modern culture. We are so conditioned to celebrate the heroic sprint, the all-nighter, the dramatic 8-hour cram session before a big meeting. We equate that kind of visible, intense effort with success.
But the data just doesn't bear that out. Neurologically, that sporadic, intense effort leads to quick burnout and almost no long-term memory formation. Real structural capacity for growth is built through rhythmic, consistent, often low-level engagement.
Just consider the stark contrast. You have one person who dedicates 30 focused minutes to their C2 English practice every single day. No exceptions. It's a minimum viable practice. They're always in contact with the material. That person will almost invariably outpace someone who crams for 8 hours one weekend, exhausts themselves, burns out, and then doesn't touch the material again for a month.
The compounding effect is just exponential. And it's largely because that daily practice fights against what you could call cognitive inertia. That's the psychological resistance you feel when you have to start a big task from a complete standstill. It is so much easier to keep a habit going than it is to restart it from zero every single time.
Success isn't about those heroic sprints. It's a disciplined, sustainable marathon. It's about ensuring that a minimum daily effort is met, even on the days you don't feel motivated, even when your energy is low. That consistent, rhythmic effort builds the mental and cognitive muscle far more effectively than any sporadic, high-intensity burst ever could.
And that really is the bedrock. The mindset has to prioritize that disciplined routine over any idea of raw, innate talent.
Right.
So, okay. We've established the fertile ground, the growth mindset, the pragmatic optimism. Now we need the actual framework, the blueprint for the seeds we're going to plant.
And this brings us to the architecture of effective goals. Now, I know many of you listening are probably intimately familiar with the SMART acronym. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. We acknowledge that familiarity. But today, our commitment is to re-examine it through a much more nuanced, a C2 level lens. We're trying to elevate SMART from a simple management tool to a sophisticated intellectual instrument for self-design.
I'm glad you said that because I think for many advanced learners, SMART can feel a bit basic. So let's do that rigorous deconstruction. Let's start with S for specific. The core problem with a vague goal is that it's cognitively unhelpful. A goal like, I want to get better at English, offers zero traction for your brain's executive function. It doesn't tell your mind what to do, when to do it, or how to even start.
And that lack of specificity is the number one driver of what they call analysis paralysis. You just don't know where to begin, so you don't. A specific goal, on the other hand, provides a high-resolution target. It transforms that vague wish into a concrete operational directive. You know exactly which linguistic subskill you're targeting, and you know what resources, grammar rules, vocabulary, practice are needed to hit that target.
Okay, let's make this really rigorous for a C2 learner. Consider the difference. The vague goal is, I will improve my grammar. The specific operational directive would be something like, I will master the use of the present perfect continuous tense, specifically how it applies to duration and continuity in formal business emails. And I will intentionally draft 3 emails a week that incorporate it.
See the layers of specificity there? It's incredible. It dictates the what one specific tense, the how its application, the context formal business correspondence, and the quantity 3 emails weekly. That high resolution target just minimizes cognitive friction. It makes the necessary practice immediately obvious. The goal stops being a wish and it becomes a defined, actionable project.
All right, moving on to M for measurable. This is all about creating an empirical feedback loop, which is so essential for keeping your motivation up. If you can't measure your progress, you can't really manage your effort. And crucially, you can't celebrate those small wins along the way.
Right. Measurability gives you quantifiable evidence of your effort and your progress. And that serves a vital psychological function because it fights back against that vague, self-critical voice that so often tells you, you're not really getting anywhere. That self-doubt starts to dissolve when it's confronted with cold, hard data that says, yes, you are.
And we should probably distinguish here between leading and lagging indicators. A lagging indicator is the result, like a final test score. You can't directly control it. A leading indicator is the measurable action you take every day. That you can control.
That's a key distinction. Let's take a common goal. I want to acquire more C2 vocabulary. It's vague, it's unmeasurable, it's very easy to just let it slide. A rigorous, measurable goal that focuses on output would be, I will read one intellectually demanding long-form article from, say, The Economist or The Guardian every day. And immediately after, I will summarize its core argument and tone in precisely 3 complex sentences, making sure I use at least 2 new vocabulary words I encountered.
That is such a powerful example for an advanced learner. It's got 3 measurable dimensions. The frequency, that's your daily leading indicator, the quantity, 1 article, and the quality of the output summarizing a complex argument. It forces you to actually manipulate complex syntax and new vocabulary under pressure. It turns passive consumption into tangible, measurable production.
Next up is A for achievable. And this, I think, is perhaps the most delicate balancing act in designing your goals. The goal has to be challenging enough to stretch you, to pull you just outside your current comfort zone. What the psychologist Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development, or ZPD.
But let's be honest, for a lot of ambitious C2 learners, ambition can easily outweigh reality. How do you stop what you might call false ambition? Setting a goal that sounds impressive but is so audacious it just shatters your resolve at the very first hurdle.
That is precisely the trap. The goal must not be so audacious, so divorced from your actual schedule and your energy levels that it's just not feasible. A goal that's too easy is boring. You'll stagnate. A goal that is mathematically impossible within the constraints of your life, that is instantly demotivating. You have to live in that ZPD.
Right. So, for example, a busy professional working 60 hours a week might, in a fit of motivation, decide they're going to study advanced philosophy texts for 3 hours every single day. That schedule is just a blueprint for catastrophic failure, for burnout, and for abandoning the entire project. It's an ideal built on a fantasy.
The achievable, reality-based alternative respects that ZPD. It would be something like, I will listen to one 15-minute advanced English podcast on a topic related to my job during my morning commute. And then I'll dedicate 10 minutes as soon as I get to my desk to actively review and integrate 5 new terms I heard. You see, that goal is still aspirational in its content, but it's perfectly grounded in the reality of their existing schedule. It finds that sweet spot between challenge and feasibility.
Okay, now let's talk about R for relevant. This one gets to the very heart of the motivational engine. A goal has to resonate deeply with your why, with your core ethos. If you're only chasing a goal because you feel you should or because it will look impressive to other people, the motivation is going to be brittle. It's external.
And when a goal lacks that intrinsic alignment with your personal values, the motivational tank just runs dry as soon as that initial wave of enthusiasm is gone. Relevance provides the intellectual and emotional ballast you need to keep your efforts stable when the winds of life stress, work, illness get turbulent.
And we need to move beyond just instrumental alignment, right? So not just, I need English for my job, but focusing on intrinsic alignment. What emotional, intellectual, or human connection does this goal actually serve for me?
Yes, and that relevance will dictate everything, the content, the register, the focus. If your main objective is to build deeper trust and connection with international colleagues in a very specialized field, your relevant goal should zero in on mastering specific business idioms, technical jargon, and those subtle cultural nuances of high-stakes negotiation.
But if your objective is totally different, say the pure intellectual joy of appreciating classical literature, maybe you want to read Shakespeare or historical documents in their original form, then the focus has to be completely different. You're mastering rhetorical devices, classical vocabulary, literary critique. The amount of effort is the same, but that internal alignment is what decides which path will provide that self-generating, enduring motivation.
And finally, we have T for time-bound. This is absolutely non-negotiable. It's your crucial defense against the slow, insidious creep of procrastination. It's essentially a conscious application of Parkinson's law, the idea that work expands to fill the time that you allotted for its completion.
So without a deadline, a goal doesn't have that necessary pressure to force you to act today. It just remains a dream. It's an abstract idea that can live comfortably in the vague, distant future forever. A deadline forces you to prioritize and allocate resources right now.
Just contrast these 2 statements. First, I will eventually complete this rigorous online course on advanced grammar. That is a wish. It could be next week, next month, next decade. It carries 0 psychological weight.
Now, compare that to the structurally robust version. I will complete this rigorous online course by the end of the second quarter. This requires finishing 1 module per week and dedicating 90 minutes every Friday to a review session, all of which is tracked to my digital calendar. That immediately creates a timeline. It forces micro deadlines. It generates a healthy, manageable sense of urgency. The goal becomes real because it takes up specific non-negotiable slots in your calendar.
Exactly.
So we have the bedrock, which is the mindset. We have the blueprint, the smart strategy. Now we have to face the most common stumbling block of all: Execution. This is where we bridge that huge gap between a grand, well-articulated ambition and the gritty, often boring daily reality of actually showing up.
The key philosophical shift here is to embrace systems over a reliance on motivation. That gap between what you want and what you do is bridged not by sheer willpower, which is a finite resource that gets depleted, but by meticulously engineered behavioral systems. Your grand vision might be C2 fluency, but your effective system is the non-negotiable 20 minutes of active listening you do every morning while your coffee brews.
This gets to a really fundamental distinction that every advanced learner has to internalize. Motivation is a fickle muse. Habit is a sturdy workhorse. The muse is unreliable. She only shows up when inspiration strikes, which is usually when you don't really need her. The workhorse is there every single day, steady, reliable, predictable, regardless of how you feel.
And the profound power of a strong system built on these automatic habits is that it offloads the cognitive burden of decision-making. There's a phenomenon called ego depletion. Every time you have to decide, should I study now? Do I feel like it? Is it worth the effort today? You are draining your finite willpower.
But if you have a pre-established automated routine, the system, you completely bypass that draining internal debate. If your system dictates, after I shut down my work laptop at 6 p.m., I immediately open my English journal and write 150 words, the action just becomes automatic. It's a non-negotiable part of who you are. You go from deliberation straight to execution without any cognitive friction.
And this automation lets us tap into the principle championed by James Clear. The incredible cumulative power of atomic habits. These tiny repeated actions that create a powerful compounding effect over time. Success doesn't require some massive disruptive life change. It just requires marginal gains executed with ruthless consistency.
Let's just revisit the staggering math behind this. Imagine you could improve your performance, your focus, your vocabulary, your articulation by just 1% each day.
That 1%, it feels so insignificant. It's often imperceptible on any given Tuesday morning. But over the course of a single year, it leads to a staggering 37-fold improvement. The effect is exponential. If you let yourself decay by 1% a day, you approach zero. If you consciously aim for that 1% improvement, you get exponential growth.
So how do we actually enforce that system? I think there are two critical concepts we can use: habit stacking and environment design.
Right. Habit stacking is the strategic linking of a new desired behavior to an already established one. You don't rely on your memory, you rely on the sequence. The formula is simple. After I current habit, I will new habit. So for a learner, that could look like, after I pour my first cup of coffee, I will review yesterday's 5 new vocabulary words. The coffee becomes the non-negotiable trigger.
And environment design is so crucial for minimizing that friction, for reducing the cognitive inertia. If your goal is to read that Economist article every day, you don't keep your tablet hidden in a drawer. You leave it open on the kitchen table, already on the website. You make the act of starting the habit as simple and frictionless as you possibly can.
This is the quiet truth of high achievement. Success is rarely the result of a single, huge, life-altering event. It's the cumulative result of thousands of small, correct choices. The deliberate removal of friction, the careful structuring of your routine, performed diligently and consistently over a long period of time.
So your daily actions, they're not just tasks to check off a to-do list. They are, in effect, continuous votes for the identity of the person you want to become. Every 30-minute focus session is a vote for the identity of someone who is proficient in C2 English. The more votes you cast, the stronger that identity becomes, and the easier the actions are to maintain. The workhorse of habit is sustained by this sense of self.
Now, we absolutely must address the most certain reality in this whole architectural plan, and that is the inevitable presence of setbacks, of failures. The journey towards any significant achievement will not be a neat, linear ascent with green check marks every day.
I think we need to be really clear with our listeners about this. It will be, without fail, a messy, fluctuating journey. It will have peaks, plateaus, and deep troughs. You will miss a habit day. You might even miss a whole week. Your motivation will plummet for no apparent reason. An unforeseen crisis at work, a family emergency, an illness. Something will derail your carefully planned study period. It's guaranteed.
The key, therefore, is to normalize these setbacks. To have the intellectual framework ready to process them correctly when they happen, we must frame failure not as an emotional indictment of our ability, but simply as unexpected data.
Unexpected data is just information. I mean, if a hypothesis fails in a science lab, the scientist doesn't throw in the towel on their career. They analyze the data with detachment to figure out why it failed and what new variables they need to consider for the next experiment. When you stumble linguistically or you miss a target, it is not an emotional crisis. It is an empirical finding about a weakness in your system.
And this brings us to what might be the most crucial skill of all for high achievers. Emotional resilience, coupled with the immediate conscious application of cognitive reframing. This is the ability to shift the meaning you assign to an event in real time.
Let's walk through what that actually looks like. Let's use a linguistic example. Say you make a significant grammar error. Maybe you misuse a complex clause during a high-stakes conversation. The immediate fixed mindset response is shame. You feel an impulse to withdraw.
But the growth mindset immediately reframes that mistake. You don't see it as a failure. You see it as a free lesson that has highlighted a precise, testable gap in your knowledge. The mistake served a high-value purpose. It showed you exactly which rule you need to review tonight. You should almost internally thank the mistake for its clarity.
And it's the same when you miss a whole week of study because of an emergency. You cannot allow yourself to catastrophize it. Don't let that one deviation derail the entire long-term system you've built.
Acknowledge it pragmatically, accept the lost time as an unfortunate but necessary part of life, and then immediately pivot your cognitive energy to the only question that matters. What is my next right move to get back on track? We can use what's sometimes called the 2-day rule here. Never miss your core habit 2 days in a row. A 1-day skip is an anomaly. A 2-day skip is the beginning of a new negative habit.
This ability to pivot is really a deep application of a central Stoic principle, the dichotomy of control. The Stoics drew this clear line between what is inside your autonomous control and what is external and uncontrollable. You cannot control external events, you can't control an illness or the intrinsic difficulty of a language.
But you possess absolute autonomous control over your response to what happened and your interpretation of that event. That is where all your power lies. You choose the meaning you assign to the setback, and you choose the action that follows it. Dwelling on the lost time is wasted energy. Focusing on the immediate next step is productive power.
This requires cultivating a compassionate and pragmatic inner dialogue. You have to actively disrupt the cycle of self-flagellation. Berating yourself for missing a day of study is not motivation. It's counterproductive emotional sabotage that just leads to more inertia and makes it even harder to start again.
Instead, you practice self-correction, guided by rational thought. You treat yourself as you would a brilliant friend you are mentoring who is struggling. With encouragement, with rigorous honesty, and with an unyielding focus on the next constructive step. This ability to regulate your own emotional response to failure is arguably as crucial as any grammar rule or learning strategy. It's the ultimate stabilizer for the entire architecture.
So we've laid out the mechanics, the systems, the psychological resilience. To bring this deep dive to its final integrating point, we have to talk about the soul of the architecture. And that is the unwavering alignment of your structural goals with your deepest personal values.
Without this deep alignment, this intrinsic connection to your core identity, the whole structure remains fundamentally fragile. It's susceptible to being dismantled when things inevitably get tough. We have to rigorously contrast extrinsic versus intrinsic motivation.
An extrinsic goal. Something like earning a specific salary or getting a certain test score just for external validation, for bragging rights. It can feel incredibly hollow once you've achieved it. This leads to what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. The satisfaction is fleeting, it recedes quickly, and you have to start chasing the next empty success.
But now consider a goal that is intrinsically aligned. A goal to gain linguistic proficiency so you can fully immerse yourself in creative, non-translated literary work. Or to achieve clarity in English so you can contribute meaningfully to global scientific collaboration and advance human knowledge. That is a goal with a soul. It's connected to something infinitely bigger than the task itself.
When goals are deeply interwoven with your highest personal values, like learning for its own sake, fostering connection, expressing creativity, contributing to society, they generate the most powerful, enduring form of motivation. The journey itself stops being a burden and becomes inherently rewarding.
This is why, before you commit to the architectural blueprint for 2026, we really encourage deep, unflinching introspection. You have to ask yourself, what are the fundamental principles I want to live by? What identity am I actually trying to build? What is my personal definition of a life well lived?
And this brings us to a beautiful, complex concept from the ancient Greeks, articulated most clearly by Aristotle: eudaimonia.
Eudaimonia is so critical here. It's often, and I think inadequately, translated as happiness. A far more accurate, more intellectually rigorous translation is something like human flourishing or living well in accordance with virtue. It is emphatically not about fleeting sensory pleasure. That's hedonia.
So it's about the sustained state of actualizing your highest potential, of operating in accordance with reason and virtue. The effort is the virtue. Therefore, your goals must be an expression of these intrinsic values.
Exactly. If your goal is to master public speaking in English, the underlying value shouldn't just be career advancement. It should be the ability to contribute your ideas effectively, to exercise courage, and to connect authentically with other people. When the goal supports eudaimonia, the motivation becomes self-sustaining, and the architecture can resist any external decay.
Finally, we need to reframe how we track our progress. It shouldn't be a source of performance pressure or a tool to beat yourself up with on bad days. It should be a private, ongoing celebration of your commitment.
Yes. Cultivate a simple journal. Call it a commitment ledger or an architectural diary. Note your small wins, the new idiom you used correctly, the difficult article you analyzed. But just as importantly, reflect on your challenges. Record the cognitive insights they provided you, that unexpected data we talked about.
And this journaling isn't for an audience. It's not for Instagram. It's a rigorous, honest dialogue with yourself, a process of active self-mentorship. It's a testament to your own structural evolution.
Ooh.
It lets you see the aggregate growth that those tiny 1% daily changes often hide, ensuring the architecture you're building is meant to last a lifetime.
So as we draw this deep dive on the architecture of achievement for 2026 to a close, let's just synthesize those essential components one last time.
It all begins with the mindset. Cultivating that growth mindset and self-efficacy, embracing pragmatic optimism, and welcoming setbacks as high-value data.
It's built on a solid strategy, using that elevated SMART framework to give your goals high-resolution clarity, intellectual rigor, and a robust structure.
It's sustained by systems. The daily, reliable habits and frictionless environment design that automate your progress, prioritizing that sturdy workhorse over the fickle muse of motivation.
It's fortified by resilience, that learned ability of emotional regulation and stoic cognitive reframing, which ensures you pivot and learn from setbacks instead of succumbing to them.
And ultimately, it is powered by deep alignment, making sure your efforts are in harmony with your core values, moving you intentionally toward a life of eudaimonia, of true human flourishing.
Thank you so much for joining us in the Advanced Learner Studio today. We really hope this discussion has given you both the philosophical inspiration and the precise intellectual tools you need to make 2026 a year of profound, intentional, structural growth.
And we invite you to join the continued discourse below. We genuinely want to hear from you. What is one specific achievable goal you are setting for your English learning journey this year? And crucially, how does it align with your deepest personal values? Share your architecture with us.
Until next time. Keep learning and keep thinking structurally.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. I'm Emma, and it is a real pleasure to be continuing our discussion with you as we really dig into the complexities of advanced achievement.
And I'm John. It's great to be back.
In part one, we really focused on that fundamental blueprint, establishing a resilient growth mindset, setting truly strategic, smart goals.
And making sure everything was aligned with your core values. That was the key.
Exactly. We moved past the generic what and why and into designing a structure that was, built for maximum stability.
And if that first deep dive was about being the architect, the high-level vision, the foundational plans.
The blueprint.
Precisely, the blueprint. Then today, consider this a masterclass in engineering and construction.
I like that.
We're moving the conversation from the whiteboard, from the theoretical design, straight onto the building site. This is where success is actually, fabricated, piece by piece.
So we're shifting from being an architect of intention to an engineer of execution.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And that shift is truly everything for the advanced learner, isn't it? I mean, It's the difference between knowing you need a bridge to cross a river,
right,
and understanding the precise physics required to build that bridge so it can actually withstand years of use, high winds, heavy traffic.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
So our mission today is laser focused. We want to equip you with an advanced, immediately actionable toolkit. We are diving into let's call it the engineering level of self-mastery, moving beyond just surface level motivation.
And into sophisticated systems design. The goal is to move past all the motivational platitudes, the self-help version of just try harder, and build robust systems.
Systems that actually work.
Systems that work. We're going to translate those well-designed plans, your goals, your aligned values, into a tangible, lasting framework of achievement.
Okay, so what's in this toolkit?
It's built on 3 core pillars. First, the microengineering of habits. This is like the foundational structural steel.
Got it.
Second, the essential art of intelligent progress tracking, which is our continuous system calibration. And finally, the most critical yet often overlooked discipline of energy management.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start right at the ground floor with the most critical element, the actual engineering of our daily habits. Because this right here addresses the point of failure we see time and time again for anyone trying to build something new, whether it's, learning complex English literature or scaling a business.
It's always the same gap.
It's that massive debilitating gap between knowing what you intend to do and actually consistently executing on that action.
And that is the exact moment where conventional brute force advice just completely collapses. We all intellectually agree that we should build good habits.
Of course.
And we genuinely intend to.
Yeah.
But the execution is just so fraught with difficulty.
And the common refrain is always just be more disciplined or just try harder.
Right, which is fundamentally insufficient for sustained high-level success. And here's why. Discipline is a finite resource. Think of it like a muscle that fatigues rapidly when you overuse it. So if you rely solely on willpower, especially when you're navigating the inevitable stress, fatigue, or just the chaos of life,
Which is going to happen.
it is absolutely going to happen. You are setting yourself up for guaranteed failure on your worst, most vulnerable days.
So the goal of a sophisticated system design is to minimize how much you even need to rely on that willpower in the first place.
Exactly. You engineer the need for willpower out of the equation as much as possible.
So the answer isn't to just try and bulk up our willpower muscle, but to rely on smarter behavioral engineering.
That's it.
Okay, so where do we start? What's the first foundational strategy?
We start with what we call environmental design, or the proactive management of propinquity.
Propinquity. That's a fancy word.
It is, but it just means proximity or nearness. The core principle comes straight from behavioral psychology, and it's deceptively simple. What is near to you is what you will do.
What's close is what gets done.
Pretty much. You have to consciously manipulate your environment, your physical space, your digital space, even your relationships, to reduce the cognitive friction around the behaviors you want.
And by doing that, you make the desired habits almost inevitable.
Almost inevitable. Success is just designing a framework where the path of least resistance is also the path toward your goal.
Okay, let's make this concrete.
Yeah.
Apply this directly to our advanced learner. Say your goal is deep engagement with, complex English critical theory. That's cognitively demanding stuff.
Very demanding.
If the required reading material is currently shelved away in another room, buried under a pile of papers, you've just introduced significant friction.
A huge amount of friction. You have to remember the task, then you have to decide to get up, walk to the other room, find the book, clear space for it.
And then you actually have to overcome the inertia of starting the reading itself. That little chain of decisions is exhausting before you even read a single word.
It is. So we counter this with positive environmental engineering. You strategically place that required material. For example,
Put the critical theory text on your pillow, so it's the very first physical object you interact with when you get into bed.
okay.
Or place it right next to the coffee machine, where you naturally pause every single morning. By doing this, you deliberately reduce the effort required to start the task to basically zero.
So it stops being this extra thing you have to force yourself to remember and just becomes a natural, integrated part of your existing flow.
That's it.
And what's equally vital, I'd imagine, is using the same principle for the negative application, creating strategic resistance against the habits you want to break.
Absolutely. We talked about the problem of doom scrolling or wasting time on a phone during deep work periods. This is where you rely on engineering, not just, moralizing.
You can't just tell yourself, I won't do it.
No. You must rely on physics and system barriers, not on a momentary flash of conscience. If the goal is to prevent distraction, leave the phone in another room entirely.
Maybe you put it in a box or drawer that requires a key to open. The simple fact of having to get up, walk across the house, unlock the container, and get the device.
That creates resistance. It increases the cognitive friction.
Exactly. And that brief, mandatory moment of resistance is often enough to break the impulsive cycle. It gives your better, more rational judgment the split second it needs to kick in and say, wait, what am I doing?
So you're leveraging architecture to defeat impulse.
You're leveraging architecture to defeat impulse. That's a fantastic way to put it.
That concept, using physical friction to break negative digital habits, that's a powerful insight. But what about the digital environment itself? We spend so much of our lives there. How do we apply propinquity to our computer screens?
That is the advanced layer of environmental design, and it's critical. For the learner, if your deep work requires an application, let's say a specific distraction-free writing interface, you make that the first thing you see.
So put the icon in the dock, front and center.
Front and center. Or set it to auto-launch when you start your computer. Conversely, you apply friction to the distraction apps.
Hide them.
Hide them. Delete social media apps from the main screens. Move them into obscure folders labeled something unappealing, like administration or taxes. You are designing the screen's topography so the desired path, the writing app, is frictionless and the distraction path is actively laborious.
I love that. Okay, so once we master environmental design, we can start to integrate the new behavior into our established routines, right?
Yeah.
Through a technique that minimizes the strain on our working memory. You're talking about habit stacking.
Yes. This is a concept popularized by the researcher B.J. Fogg, and it is absolutely brilliant because it essentially hijacks your existing robust neural pathways.
What do you mean by hijacks?
Well, instead of trying to carve out a new, unfamiliar time slot in your day, which is really hard, you're simply attaching the new, fragile habit to a pre-existing, deeply ingrained one. That leverage is the genius of the system.
The formula for this is beautifully concise. It's just, after current habit, I will new habit.
That's it. Simple and unambiguous. You identify a pre-existing, non-negotiable anchor routine, something you do every single day without fail.
Like turning on the kettle. Pouring your coffee.
Or putting your key in the door when you arrive home. Anything that's already automatic.
So for our learner, what would an implementation look like?
It could be. After I pour my first cup of coffee in the morning, I will spend 5 minutes listening to the most challenging English news broadcast of the day.
Okay, I see. The act of pouring coffee is already deeply ingrained. It takes no cognitive effort.
Zero. And the new fragile habit, that challenging listening practice, is now anchored directly to that robust anchor. It basically rides the coattails of the established routine, making it far more likely to stick because the trigger for it is already automatic.
I love that, but here's a potential pitfall I see. Does this method create a sort of dependency? If the anchor habit breaks, say you travel and you stop drinking coffee for a week, or your whole morning routine is disrupted, does the new fragile habit just collapse?
That is a very sophisticated question, and it speaks to the need for redundancy in good system design. And the answer is yes, dependency is a risk.
So what's the solution?
The solution isn't to avoid stacking, it's to diversify your anchors. You should have stacks anchored to different times of day and different environmental triggers. For example, have a morning stack, an evening stack, and a transition stack, like after you put away dinner. If the morning stack fails for some reason, you have 2 other opportunities later in the day to reinforce the behavior.
That makes sense.
And furthermore, once that new habit has run on the coattails of the anchor for, say, 3 months, it should have enough independent neural strength to stand on its own, even if the anchor is temporarily removed.
So we're building strength through repetition, not just relying on the crutch forever.
Exactly.
And that brings us to the final, incredibly powerful micro-strategy, the 2-minute rule. This rule is specifically designed to surgically remove that psychological barrier of just getting started.
Yes. The core directive is to scale down any new habit, no matter how ambitious it is, to an action that takes less than 2 minutes to start.
This is aimed at the pervasive mistake that high achievers make, isn't it? We tend to start way too aggressively.
Way too aggressively. We define studying English as a 90-minute immersion session, or starting my novel as writing 3,000 words.
Which immediately translates in the mind to significant effort and cognitive load.
And when a task feels overwhelming, procrastination is the brain's perfectly logical avoidance mechanism. The 2-minute rule is the elegant intervention that just flips that avoidance script.
So the core goal is not the massive immediate outcome. It's about mastering the art of showing up.
That's it. It's about building the identity of the person who shows up for that commitment, even if it's just for a brief moment. We want to make the initial immediate action laughably easy.
So what are some examples?
Transforming read every day into open the book and read 1 page, or transforming practice writing into write 1 sentence.
And the power of inertia is our ally here. Once you've written that 1 sentence, The engine is already running, the laptop is open, your cognitive resources are partially engaged.
You've already broken the starting inertia, and often you'll find yourself writing for 5, 10, maybe 30 minutes. But even if you stop after that single sentence, you have kept your promise, you've built consistency.
And that's the win.
That is the win. This is critical to understanding the neurological function. The brain hates starting something from a standstill. The activation energy required is really high.
Right.
But once the system is moving, even slowly, it's far more likely to continue because of the physical and psychological principle of momentum. The 2-minute rule ensures that momentum is generated daily.
So, to synthesize this foundational section, these 3 strategies, environmental design, habit stacking, and the 2-minute rule, this represents a profound re-engineering of self-improvement.
It really does.
We are deliberately stepping away from exhausting ourselves with these willpower battles. We're becoming the strategic engineer of our own behavior, codifying success.
We are ensuring that progress is fundamentally, structurally, the path of least resistance in our own constructed environment. This is the sophisticated toolkit that makes massive long-term goals achievable.
Absolutely. And with our microsystem of habits now running smoothly, thanks to that strategic engineering, we can move to the second critical pillar. How do we measure this progress without introducing the very anxiety and obsessive overtracking that can derail the whole system we just built?
A huge challenge. And this is where we shift from behavior engineering to systems calibration. The necessary step here requires making a crucial distinction.
And this distinction, I think, is a profound aha moment for so many high achievers, because it fundamentally redefines where we get our satisfaction from.
It does. It's the difference between outcome goals and process goals.
Okay, let's define them with surgical clarity.
The outcome goal is the destination. It's the ultimate target that lives somewhere in the future. For the advanced learner, this might be achieve a C2 certification in English by the end of the year.
Or publish that 50,000-word academic paper. It's the summit you want to reach.
Right. And the significant problem with focusing exclusively on the outcome is that your influence over it is often indirect. Outcomes are inherently volatile.
They're affected by countless external variables.
Yeah.
The difficulty of the test, the mood of the evaluator, economic shifts, unexpected family events.
All of it. And when you tie your satisfaction and your motivation entirely to these distant variable outcomes, you introduce emotional volatility and the potential for crushing disappointment that doesn't actually reflect your effort.
Okay, so that's the outcome goal. What's the process goal?
The process goal, conversely, is the daily or weekly system that is under your direct, absolute, and immediate control.
This is the activity, the effort, the adherence to the system itself.
Exactly. For example, engage in 60 minutes of active, focused English study 4 days a week, or write a minimum of 500 words of targeted content 3 days a week.
And this distinction is vital because your influence over the process is direct and absolute. You control whether you sit down for those 60 minutes.
100%. You control the quality of your focus during that time, aided by our habit systems and energy management principles. You cannot control the C2 score, but you have perfect control over the inputs that make that score possible.
So intelligent tracking methodology demands that your primary focus has to shift entirely to celebrating adherence to the process.
Yeah, it's the key. Did you show up for those 60 minutes of focused study today? That is a victory. Full stop. The quality of the input is what you celebrate, not the distant output.
The result is secondary to successfully fulfilling the process.
And this is the antidote to burnout. You are immediately rewarded daily for the work you do today. You're deriving satisfaction from your effort and your consistency, rather than agonizing over some distant variable result you can't even fully influence yet.
And we have to give the learner the tools to institutionalize this process focus. That requires a dedicated mechanism for review and calibration, right?
It does. A non-negotiable weekly ritual that we call the weekly review.
This needs to be a protected 30 to 60-minute appointment with yourself. Ideally scheduled for the same time every week, Sunday afternoon or Monday morning seem to be popular choices.
It's the essential bridge between the week that was and the week that's to come.
But the mindset here is crucial. For high achievers, review often just devolves into self-criticism. How do we make sure this meeting stays calm and diagnostic?
You have to define the ritual upfront. You are entering a calm diagnostic meeting with the CEO of your life, which is you. You're assessing the performance of your system, not your inherent personal worth.
So you treat the data impersonally.
Impersonally. If a system failed, it means the system needs refinement, not that you need judgment. The frame has to be, I am collecting data to improve my future self, not, I am judging my past failures.
And during this crucial time, there are 3 essential questions to answer in sequence. The first question is always positive and affirming, designed to harness momentum.
Right, it is. What went well this week in my process and why?
And we have to focus on the why.
Oh, absolutely. Don't just list the achievement, analyze the mechanism. Did your new habit stack work seamlessly? Great. Why? Maybe the anchor you chose was perfectly stable.
Did you hit 4 out of 4 focus days? Why? Perhaps it was because you successfully protected your peak energy window.
Exactly. Acknowledge and isolate those successful strategies so you can replicate and scale them.
Then the second question is purely diagnostic, focusing on objective data acquisition. What challenges arose and what can I learn from them?
This is the moment to look at the friction points. And again, this is not about blaming yourself. It's about identifying systemic failure points that need re-engineering.
So for instance, did the 7 a.m. study time fail 3 times because you hit the snooze button too often, feeling exhausted?
That is not a moral failing. That is a data point indicating systemic misalignment. The lesson might be that you are biologically an owl who is trying to operate as a lark. So the required adjustment, the prescription might be shifting that study slot entirely to 9:00 p.m. or aggressively adjusting your bedtime and your environmental design, putting the alarm clock on the other side of the room.
And finally, the forward-looking question, which translates that diagnosis into actionable steps. Based on this review, what is my plan? And what is the single most important priority for the upcoming week?
This question ensures that the lessons you learned from question 2, the diagnosis, become a concrete plan, the prescription.
So maybe the data means you need to implement more environmental design, like removing that distraction app from your home screen.
Or maybe the challenge was complexity, meaning the plan has to be to focus only on a single high-leverage task for the entire week. This ritual converts your learning journey from just a series of disconnected reactive days into a coherent, iterative process of continuous system refinement.
It ensures that you are consistently working on your overall framework rather than just working in your daily tasks. You stop being a passenger, just reacting to the incoming workload, and you truly become the pilot, making intentional, intelligent adjustments based on real objective feedback. This regular calibration is the absolute hallmark of advanced achievement.
It is.
Now let's unpack the third pillar of engineering achievement, which, as you mentioned, is maybe the most underrated element of high-level performance. Energy management.
It really is.
We are all culturally obsessed with managing time. We meticulously plan and track the 24 hours we have. But we completely fail to manage the finite resource that truly determines our output and the quality of that output.
Which is our mental and physical energy. This is the core insight. Not all hours are created equal.
Right.
An hour of complex, focused study when you are cognitively fatigued is functionally worthless. It might be worth, 15 minutes of study when you're at your absolute peak.
So successful engineers of achievement understand that they have to maximize the quality of the resource, their energy, not just the quantity of the time available.
And that brings us to the cardinal rule of efficiency, protecting peak energy.
You have to identify with ruthless precision that 2 to 3 hour window in your day where you are at your absolute cognitive maximum.
And this is tied to your chronotype. For most people, the larks, this is first thing in the morning. For others, the owls, it's late at night after the world has quieted down and distractions are minimal.
And once you identify that peak window, you have to protect it ferociously.
Ferociously. You treat that time like a resource more valuable than gold. This is the time you dedicate exclusively to deep work, the most cognitively demanding tasks.
Deep work, as defined by Cal Newport.
Exactly. Professional activity performed in a state of distraction-free concentration that pushes your cognitive capabilities right to their limit. It's the work that generates novel value, the work that can't be easily replicated.
So for our English learner, this is a non-negotiable boundary. Peak energy time is not for passively reviewing vocabulary lists or checking email.
No. It is the time for writing a complex, argumentative essay that requires synthesizing multiple conflicting sources or engaging in the intricate, high-focus practice required for mastering difficult pronunciation and intonation patterns.
The needle-moving tasks that only your peak brain can handle efficiently.
That's it. And conversely, we have to be absolutely intelligent about matching tasks to energy levels.
So you align low-energy periods with low-demand tasks. It's strategic scheduling.
Right. If you realize your focus drops sharply after lunch due to digestion and metabolic changes, do not schedule your most difficult grammar practice or abstract conceptual learning for that time.
So that hour-long commute where you're mentally drained from the workday, that is not the time to try and absorb complex new material.
No, it's the perfect slot for a low-demand reinforcement task, like listening to an English podcast you've already heard before. This allows you to reinforce learning passively without requiring high cognitive effort.
Or that post-lunch slump we mentioned.
That's ideal for shallow work. Organizing your study notes, creating flashcards from existing content, or doing simple administrative tasks related to your learning. You're still using the time productively, but you're not demanding high-quality, high-focus cognitive output when your resources are naturally depleted.
This is the definition of working smarter, maximizing the utility of every energy state you experience throughout the day.
It is.
Now, I've been implementing these ideas myself, and I've been trying to honor the need for rest, but I hit a snag. I tried strategic disengagement yesterday, and about 5 minutes into sitting in silence, I realized I was actively composing a mental to-do list for next Tuesday.
I know that feeling.
And I was also drafting a witty response to a Slack message I hadn't even received yet. I had to laugh at the irony. Is that still rest?
That is a perfectly accurate and frankly hilarious description of the modern cognitive load. And no, that is not true rest. That is passive rumination under the guise of stillness. Under energy management, we have to fundamentally reevaluate our relationship with rest. For high achievers, rest is often viewed suspiciously, like a sign of weakness or a waste of time.
Right.
We have to internalize that rest is not optional. It is a requisite for high performance. It's built into the system, just like mandatory cooling cycles are built into a high-performance engine.
And the distinction of what constitutes true rest is crucial. It's not just scrolling social media or binge-watching television.
Yeah, those are all different forms of cognitive load. They engage the attention network and often deplete rather than genuinely replenish your resources. We must prioritize strategic disengagement.
Which involves actively choosing activities that allow the brain to switch modes.
Yes. When you perform high-focus deep work, you're using the brain's central executive network. To truly recover, you need to activate the default mode network, or DMN.
And the DMN is what processes memories, consolidates learning,
and facilitates creative problem-solving while you're focused on low-input passive tasks.
So strategic disengagement involves activities that promote DMN activation. Taking a walk in nature, meditating, or simply sitting in silence without input.
The point is the lack of forced attention. This allows the brain to consolidate those new English vocabulary words or the complex grammar rules you forced into your short-term memory during deep work. If you want consistently high output, you must integrate high-quality, intentional recovery.
So if you're using a technique like Pomodoro, 25 minutes of focus, 5-minute break, that 5-minute break should be strategic disengagement.
Exactly. Close your eyes, look out a window, stand up, and stretch without checking your phone. That cognitive break is designed to maximize the next 25 minutes of peak performance.
Okay. We've covered the microengineering of habits, the intelligent calibration of the system through tracking, and the critical management of energy. Now we get to the final advanced module, the tools required for navigating the deep psychological barriers that inevitably derail even the most disciplined people.
This is where we move from tactics to long-term strategy and self-knowledge, because the path of achievement is rarely linear or straightforward.
Right.
And the first complexity we have to prepare for is the painful but sometimes necessary realization that a previously vital goal has become obsolete. This is often rooted in the insidious trap of the sunk cost fallacy.
The sunk cost fallacy.
Yeah.
This is a profound, deeply embedded human tendency, isn't it?
It is. It's the continuation of pursuing an objective simply because of previously invested resources, time, money, emotional effort, even when new data clearly shows the goal is obsolete or the path is just wrong.
We're psychologically hardwired to hate the feeling of wasting what we've already given up.
Absolutely. This fallacy is responsible for keeping people locked into bad strategic decisions in business and in their learning journey long after they should have pivoted.
So for our learner, maybe they spent 18 months meticulously focused on passing a specific high-level certification, only to realize that their true career path has changed.
And now they need rapid, aggressive conversational fluency and negotiation skills instead. Sticking rigidly to the academic path just because of the sunk time and the money spent on textbooks is an act of high-level self-sabotage.
And this cognitive bias is amplified by what economists call loss aversion. The idea that the pain of losing something we already have, like our invested time, is roughly twice as strong as the pleasure of gaining something new.
Which is why we stick to the bad path. The feeling of loss is just so disproportionately painful.
So how do you break free?
It requires immense self-awareness and, even more, immense courage. You need a cognitive intervention, a diagnostic tool to cut through that emotional attachment. You have to ask yourself a very specific, courageous question.
And it's not, how much have I already invested in this?
No. The question is, knowing what I know now, based on all the valuable data I've accumulated up to this moment, would I still choose to begin this exact journey today?
Wow.
If the answer, honestly, is a clear and resounding no, then you must grant yourself immediate, unconditional permission to pivot.
And that reframing is absolutely essential to advanced decision-making. A strategic pivot is not a failure.
It is not a failure. It's not an admission of weakness or a waste of time. It is a strategic realignment based on new, valuable data that you paid for with your effort.
So the resources you spent weren't wasted.
No, they secured the crucial insight that allows you to pursue a more rewarding, better aligned path going forward. You are choosing intelligence and strategic optimization over psychological inertia.
Okay. So that's the first complexity. What's the second major psychological barrier?
Navigating what is universally known as the messy middle.
The messy middle. This is the long, inevitable plateau that happens after the initial exciting honeymoon phase has completely vanished.
But before the significant, noticeable lagging results have materialized.
Think about the typical learning curve for any complex skill. You see rapid, exciting initial progress, the low-hanging fruit, and your motivation is naturally high.
And then you hit a long, grinding stretch where growth is still happening, but it's microscopic. It's hidden deep within your neural pathways, and it is certainly not visible on a daily or even weekly basis.
And this is where the emotional engine just stalls.
This is the primary stage where upwards of 90% of people abandon their goals, simply because they mistake a plateau in visible progress for a plateau in actual progress.
So to survive the messy middle, you need sophisticated survival strategies. The first is psychological, and it connects back to our process discussion.
Right. It's loving the process. You have to deliberately and consistently shift your mindset to make the daily effort the reward itself.
If your happiness and your motivation depend entirely on the scale tipping immediately or the exam score is suddenly jumping 10 points, you are guaranteed to quit when that plateau hits.
But if your happiness and your sense of self-worth come from simply adhering to the 60-minute focused process goal we talked about earlier, you become psychologically unstoppable. You endure the middle because the daily act of showing up is itself the victory you sought.
And the second strategy is purely technical. It connects back to our intelligent tracking module.
It's tracking leading indicators. When you're deep in the messy middle, the lagging indicators, like the final exam score or the C2 certification, are months away. They are useless as daily fuel. You need immediate, high-octane fuel to keep the engine running.
So leading indicators are the small, early signs of progress that affirm the system is working, even when the major outcome is still distant.
They are immediate feedback loops. You have to actively look for them and celebrate them.
So for our English learner, a great leading indicator isn't the final result, but noticing that you understood a nuanced joke in a difficult movie without subtitles for the first time.
That's a perfect example. Or it's that small moment when you effortlessly use a new piece of complex vocabulary like propinquity in a spontaneous conversation without having to mentally translate it first. That is tangible proof of compounding effort.
Or, if you're professional using your language skills, it's that feeling of confidence when you enter a difficult meeting and realize you're keeping up with the speed and the nuance of the discussion better than you were last month.
These are the affirming signals. They are tangible, measurable proof that the small, consistent efforts you put in during the plateau are compounding, even if the final structure is still under construction. You have to track these granular metrics, the number of successful flashcard sessions, the percentage of essays finished on time, the duration of uninterrupted deep work streaks.
These small wins are the necessary fuel to persevere through the messy middle until the inevitable lagging indicators finally catch up.
They really are.
And so we synthesize the insights from this entire two-part deep dive, the architecture of achievement.
The profound insight we hope you internalize is this. High achievement is not some mystery reserved for the genetically gifted few. It is a learnable skill. It's a discipline that can be engineered, honed, and mastered.
It begins with the blueprint, the mindset, and the values, and it is completed through sophisticated, consistent engineering.
That engineering involves deliberately designing your environment and your behavior using tactics like habit stacking and the 2-minute rule.
It means celebrating your process adherence above your volatile outcomes and conducting regular, calm, weekly reviews.
It means managing your energy with intention, prioritizing deep work during your identified cognitive peak. And finally, it requires the wisdom and courage to navigate those inevitable psychological complexities.
Like the insidious sunk cost fallacy and the demanding psychological terrain of the messy middle.
Your potential is not a fixed quantity to be discovered by chance. It is a dynamic capacity to be built, meticulously, systematically, year after year, project after project.
We sincerely hope this series has armed you with both the intellectual framework and the immensely practical tools to make the systems you build in the coming year periods of profound, meaningful, and sustainable growth. Now, we turn the conversation over to you, our advanced learner community. We invite you to share one specific technique we discussed today. It could be implementing a new habit stack, scheduling that 30-minute weekly review and defining its guardrails, or using environment design to create friction against a major distraction that you will commit to implementing this week.
Let's transform this powerful theory into immediate, intentional action.
Thank you for lending us your time, your intellect, and your focus for this deep dive.
Until we meet again in the studio, keep learning and keep building the structure that your best, highest performing self truly deserves.
Welcome back to the deep dive. I am so glad you're with us for the final part, the real capstone of our 3-part series, The Architecture of Achievement.
It's been quite a build.
It really has. If you've been on this journey with us, you know we've been all about, well, precision engineering. Part 1 was the blueprint, right?
Exactly. We started right at the beginning, drawing the blueprint. We talked about mindset, core values, and really crafting those identity-driven goals. You have to get that foundation solid first.
Then, in part 2, we got our hands dirty. We moved into the actual construction, the engineering.
The how-to.
The real how-to. Automating progress with micro habits, setting up tracking systems for that, that crucial objective feedback, and managing energy. I loved that part, not just as a fuel tank, but as something you can actually renew to stop burnout.
And now we add the layers that decide if that amazing structure you build actually lasts a lifetime.
This is the big one.
It is. Today, we're moving beyond the single building, the edifice itself, to make sure it can evolve, that it can endure. So we're adding 2 things. The social scaffolding, that's the external support, and then cultivating this profound psychological resilience that makes the whole thing earthquake-proof.
Earthquake-proof, I like that. So that's our mission for part 3. We are shifting from building this great solitary structure to embedding it in a real powerful ecosystem.
It's all about lifelong sustainability, not just hitting one single amazing peak achievement and then what?
Exactly. The focus is shifting from building to what? Sustaining, adapting.
Both. The question totally changes. It's not how do I build something great once anymore. It's how do I make sure this greatness is maintained? How does it adapt to every single shock life throws at it? And maybe most importantly, how does it continuously feed its own growth forever?
Wow. Okay, so it's the difference between building a static monument that just sits there.
Right. A monument to something you did in the past.
Versus creating a thriving, self-repairing habitat that could stand for centuries.
That's the game we're playing today.
Okay, let's dive in. And I think we have to start with one of the biggest myths out there. This cultural story we all love.
The solitary genius.
The solitary genius. The lone author in a cabin, the independent scientist in a lab, the person who just did it all through sheer willpower. We love that story.
We do, and it's great for movies, but in reality, it's mostly misleading. You can have the most perfectly designed building in the world, but if it's standing alone in a hurricane with no external bracing, it's vulnerable.
So all that sustainable long-term achievement, the kind that defines a whole career or a lifetime of getting better at something, that's never done alone.
Almost never. When you really dig into it, it's a socially embedded enterprise. Every single time.
I think we all kind of romanticize that lonely struggle, but the sources we looked at for this are, frankly, brutal on this point.
They don't pull any punches.
No. The solitary pursuit of greatness over decades. It's a myth. So if you want your ambition to last, you have to apply that same design rigor you used for your habits to consciously designing your social world, your social scaffolding.
And we need that scaffolding because self-discipline, it's brittle. It really is. It depends entirely on your internal state.
On how you feel on a random Tuesday morning.
Exactly. Your mood, your energy. We can all power through for a while, but life happens, a family crisis, a health issue, the market tanks.
Something always happens.
It does, and that's when the external scaffolding holds you up. It provides structural integrity. It catches you. It keeps the project moving when your own internal motivation is just gone.
It stops that catastrophic collapse that can happen when one person is trying to carry this massive goal all by themselves. Okay, let's get specific. Let's talk about the first piece of this scaffolding, the one people use most often and probably misuse most often.
The accountability partner.
The accountability partner. We use that term so casually, but the source material says we have to elevate this. It's not just a weekly report.
It's a crucial elevation. We have to shift this role from being a supervisor, someone you just report to.
Did you do task A, yes or no?
Precisely. We have to move it from that to a co-pilot relationship. The word supervisor implies judgment, hierarchy. Co-pilot implies you're in it together.
A shared fate.
Shared fate, shared authority, shared responsibility. You're both looking at the same flight plan. Both of you have to monitor the altitude, the fuel, the navigation. It's a partnership.
That one word change, from supervisor to co-pilot, that changes everything. It's not punitive anymore, it's supportive. Sure. So what are the non-negotiables? What does this kind of dynamic need to work?
The research points to two absolute must-haves: reciprocity and psychological safety.
Okay, reciprocity first.
Reciprocity just means it's a 50-50 alliance. It has to be mutual. You are just as invested in their flight plan, their success, as they are in yours. If you're only showing up to list your metrics and then tuning out,
it just becomes a chore for them.
A chore for them and a totally superficial exercise for you. It'll fall apart.
And the second one, psychological safety, that feels even more important.
It's the whole foundation. If you're afraid of being judged when you inevitably miss a target or, completely fail at a task,
it will happen.
It will absolutely happen. If you fear that judgment, you'll start to lie or you'll minimize the setback. Or you'll just start ghosting the check-ins altogether, and then the whole system is pointless.
If you're lying to your co-pilot, the plane is going down.
Exactly. You're not just breaking trust, you are robbing yourself of critical diagnostic data right when you need it most. And that brings us to the core function of this relationship.
Which is?
You have to shift from supervisory questions to diagnostic questions.
Okay, let's make this tactical. Let's say I come to my co-pilot, and I say, look, I plan to write for an hour every day. I only did 15 minutes all week. Give me the bad response, the supervisor response.
The supervisor response is, that's terrible. Why didn't you try harder? You've got to stop making excuses. It's all about the outcome, and it's loaded with moral judgment.
Okay, now give me the good one, the diagnostic co-pilot response.
A diagnostic conversation changes the focus from who's at fault to how the system is functioning. It asks, okay, what got in the way? Was it a time issue, an energy issue, or was it maybe a clarity issue? Did you not know what to write?
So you're looking for the mechanical breakdown, not the character flaw.
That's it, exactly. The really powerful questions are things like, how did it feel when you were trying to start? Or when you did sit down, what was the very first point of friction you hit?
What specific thing did we forget to plan for?
Yes. What variable did we miss? Those questions turn a personal failure into just a technical problem. And a technical problem can be analyzed, iterated on, and fixed.
So the co-pilot relationship is like this safe lab where failure is just data. But what if the problem is bigger than that? What if it's so strategic, so complex that two people just don't have the answers?
That's a great question. That's the signal. That's when you know you've outgrown the co-pilot relationship for that specific problem. You need to scale up your scaffolding.
And that brings us to the next level, a much more potent level of support.
The mastermind group.
Napoleon Hill made this famous, right?
Yeah.
And it's so important to stress, this is not the same as a co-pilot. It's a huge step up. This isn't just about accountability anymore.
No, this is about strategic exponential leverage. And that distinction is vital. This is absolutely not your casual book club. It's not a networking event.
So what is it? The sources had a very specific definition.
They did. They call it a symbiotic intellectual ecosystem, which I know is a very dense academic-sounding phrase.
Yeah, let's break that down, please.
Okay. First, symbiotic. That means it's a relationship of mutual benefit. The health of the whole group depends on every single person contributing. If one person just takes, the whole ecosystem starts to die.
And intellectual.
That means its main function is high-level thinking. cognitive problem solving. It's not primarily for emotional support or, just cheerleading.
Got it. And the last part, ecosystem.
That means it's a living, self-regulating system. The input from one member, their failures, their questions, their big strategic challenges, that input directly feeds the growth and insight of everyone else. It's a loop.
So what does this look like in the real world? How is it structured?
The best ones are usually small, curated groups, maybe 4 to 8 people, and curation is everything. You want people with high ambition, but, and this is key, with diverse, non-overlapping skills.
And they have to meet regularly.
Consistency is the oxygen, yep. And they follow a very structured agenda.
I'm guessing that structure is what stops it from just becoming a gripe session where everyone complains about their week.
It is. The agenda is key. Typically, each meeting gives dedicated hot seat time to each member. When it's your turn in the hot seat, you don't just ramble, you present one specific high-stakes challenge you're facing.
And you have to come prepared.
Absolutely. You present the challenge, and you also present, say, 3 possible solutions you've already thought of.
And the group's job isn't to just pick one.
Yeah.
It's cross-pollination of ideas and constructive challenge.
Precisely. Let's use an example. Imagine a surgeon is trying to optimize her clinic's patient intake process. That's her challenge.
Yeah.
She might present that to her mastermind group, which has, a software developer, a logistics expert from a shipping company, and a high-level corporate exec. She's not asking them for surgical advice.
Of course not. She's looking for different ways of seeing the problem.
Exactly. She's looking for perspective on process flow from the logistics expert, automation ideas from the software dev, and maybe high-level resource allocation from the executive.
The power there is the collective intelligence. It's incredible. That surgeon is essentially borrowing the brain power of people who live completely outside her world.
She's getting solutions that her own highly specialized brain, which is trained for one specific thing, would never, ever come up with on its own.
It's an exponential multiplier.
It is. The mastermind concept calls this the third mind. This idea that when you combine the cognitive energy of a few sharp people on one single problem, you create this synergistic, superior mind that's greater than the sum of its parts.
That sounds amazing. But let's talk about the friction. How do you keep that level of rigor up? Doesn't it get exhausting, constantly investing that much energy into other people's problems? What stops these groups from just fizzling out?
That's where the high stakes and the formal nature of the alliance come in. It isn't just a casual get-together, it's a mutual commitment. Members have to be invested in each other's success because they know how much they get in return.
So it moves you beyond just your own discipline.
It moves you from the very fickle world of self-discipline to the much, much more robust domain of shared discipline and collective intelligence.
So if I don't show up prepared, I'm not just letting myself down. I'm actively hurting this elite group that is directly helping me succeed. The social pressure is actually a positive force.
It's professional leverage that's disguised as social discipline. It's a commitment device. It's designed to keep high performers at their peak, even when their own personal motivation takes a dip.
So the big conclusion for this whole section is this necessary identity transition.
That's a great way to put it.
Once you build this kind of scaffolding, you stop being just a solitary architect who's, vulnerable to every storm and every moment of fatigue. You become a member of a guild.
Yes. And a guild gives you so much more than just accountability. It gives you shared knowledge. It gives you standards of excellence. And most importantly, it gives you permanence. A guild outlasts any one member, any one project.
By embedding your ambition in a guild, you're designing your achievement for endurance. You're ensuring its longevity.
Exactly. You've ensured the mission will continue.
That is a perfect transition from external support to, internal fortification. Because even with the best guild in the world, no architecture is immune to the seismic shocks of life.
Failure isn't a possibility. It's a statistical certainty.
It's going to happen.
It is. A plan is just a theory. A beautiful theory, maybe, but it's just a theory until it smacks into the brutal, random reality of the world.
And when that collision happens, the market tanks, you fail the exam, the project gets canceled. The standard advice everyone gives is to just be resilient.
And resilience is good. You need it to survive. But for the kind of elite, lifelong achievement we're talking about, resilience is not enough.
It's insufficient.
It is. Resilience means you bounce back to where you were before the shock. But we're aiming higher. We need something more aggressive. We need anti-fragility.
Okay, this is a huge concept, coined by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. We need to spend some real time on this because the difference between these two ideas dictates everything about how you respond to a setback.
Everything. Let's really unpack it. A resilient system is tough. Think of a rubber ball or a modern skyscraper built to handle a hurricane.
Right.
It absorbs the shock, it keeps functioning, and it returns to its original shape. It survived, but it didn't gain anything from the trauma.
It's a strong shield. That's it.
Exactly. Now compare that to an anti-fragile system. This kind of system actively benefits from stress, from volatility, from disorder. It literally feeds on shocks, and because of that, it becomes stronger and better than it was before the shock even happened.
It's the opposite of fragile, which shatters under stress.
The complete opposite. The classic example is the human body. When you lift weights, you create micro tears in your muscle fibers. That's a stress. The body's response isn't just to repair the damage back to baseline, it overcompensates, building the muscle back stronger to handle that stressor better next time.
So the stress itself is the signal for growth.
The stress is the raw material for growth. The core question for you, for the listener, is how do we systematically do this? How do we reframe our relationship with our own mistakes to get to this anti-fragile state? How do we stop seeing failure as a cost and start seeing it as a mandatory investment?
Okay, so what's the practice?
The single most effective, most radical, and frankly, most psychologically demanding practice for this is creating and maintaining a failure resume.
The failure resume. I love this. It just completely inverts the normal way of thinking. We spend our whole lives building this perfect CV of our successes.
And this forces you to document the failures, but, and this is critical, with a kind of scientific rigor. This is not a diary for self-pity.
No, it's an analytical document.
It's a clinical document.
Yeah.
The practice forces you to confront, and I love this term from the sources, to metabolize your mistakes. You have to extract every last drop of learning, of data, of insight from the setback before you're allowed to move on.
Okay, let's get mechanical. If I'm starting one today, what are the mandatory columns? What's the template?
The best ones have 5 critical parts. 1, the date and the specific failure. Be brutally honest. October 25th, 2026, failed to land contract X.
Oops.
2, the immediate emotional response. Felt intense shame, wanted to blame the client. Just documenting the emotion starts to neutralize its power over you.
Okay, that's interesting. 3,
3 is the technical core, the faulty assumption. I assumed my standard pitch deck was good enough, or I assumed they cared more about price than speed. You have to find the flawed belief.
number 4.
The mandatory correction. An action plan. Next time, I will spend 10 hours customizing the deck to their specific industry metrics, no matter what.
And the last one, number 5.
The single key lesson learned. This is the philosophical takeaway. Success in this industry requires deep personalization over standardized effort.
That structure is brilliant because it forces you to interrupt the shame spiral. My brain's default after a failure is just to feel awful and try to forget about it. This discipline demands that I immediately sit down and turn that emotional mess into a clean data input.
And that's the whole psychological shift. Failure is no longer a source of shame. It's just a neutral clinical data point in a long-term experiment. The experiment failed. Great. You just got priceless negative data. Now you incorporate that data, you refine the next experiment, and you go again.
It's the ultimate scientific mindset for personal growth. Okay, I see how that makes a person resilient, but how does it make them anti-fragile? How does this practice make me want to actively seek out stress?
Because once you truly internalize that failure is just data for a stronger next version, you stop being afraid of stressors. You actually become an active stress seeker, but, and this is important, in safe, controlled ways.
That sounds so counterintuitive. If I'm trying to get a big promotion, I can't just intentionally bomb a huge project to learn from it.
No, of course not. That's not controlled stress. That's catastrophic failure.
Sure.
You seek stress at the margins. In low-stakes environments where failure is recoverable, but the learning is steep. Let's go back to our English learner who wants C2 mastery.
Okay, the resilient learner gets corrected on their grammar and just takes it in stride.
The anti-fragile learner doesn't wait to be corrected. They actively seek it out. They join a high-level debate club where they know they'll be outmatched verbally.
They intentionally use complex sentence structures they know they're not 100% comfortable with.
Yes, because they know they'll get immediate, high-quality, high-stress feedback on their mistakes. They volunteer to give the presentation that terrifies them.
They're putting themselves in a situation designed to cause a small, manageable failure, just so they can get the data and forge the new neural pathways faster.
Yep.
The struggle is the workout.
The stress of that uncomfortable exposing moment forces the system, your whole cognitive architecture, to adapt and grow stronger much faster than if you had just stayed in your comfort zone. Comfort is the great enemy of anti-fragility. It builds brittle structures that shatter when real chaos shows up.
I think the most powerful takeaway here is the total mindset shift.
Yeah.
The fragile learner is thinking, I must avoid mistakes.
At all costs.
At all costs.
Yeah.
The anti-fragile learner shifts to this powerful new belief. My mistakes are the very raw material of my growth.
They're not a side effect. They are the necessary ingredient.
The ultimate goal, then, isn't to build this indestructible fortress. Life will always find a bigger cannon.
It will. The goal is to cultivate a living system, one that doesn't just patch holes. It uses the very energy of the damage to weld the structure back together stronger than it was before. That is how you profit from chaos.
Okay, so we've engineered the structure, we've fortified it with a guild, we've even inoculated it against failure by making it anti-fragile. That brings us to the last, and maybe the most philosophical piece of the puzzle, the ultimate why.
The big question?
The big one. What happens after? After the C2 exam is passed, after the degree is earned, after that huge goal is finally reached.
This is a silent crisis for so many high achievers. After years of focus, of sacrifice, of seeing that progress bar inch forward, they cross the finish line and they feel nothing, or worse than nothing, an emptiness. It's called the arrival fallacy.
The arrival fallacy. It's that mistaken belief that hitting the goal, finishing the building will automatically bring you this lasting, profound sense of fulfillment.
You believe the struggle ends and the happiness begins.
And when you get there, the good feeling,
Yeah.
it lasts for what? A day. An afternoon.
If you're lucky. It's so fleeting. And it's very quickly replaced by this sense of, now what? This disorientation. Some sources even call it post-achievement depression. You see it in Olympic athletes all the time. Entrepreneurs after they sell their company.
And the reason is that their whole identity was wrapped up in the struggle toward the goal, not the existence after the goal. When the goal vanishes, their whole framework collapses.
And the antidote isn't just to find a new, bigger goal. That's a trap. It just puts you back on the same hamster wheel. The real solution is a fundamental redefinition of the game you're playing.
This is where we bring in the philosopher James Carse and his framework of finite games versus infinite games.
This, for me, is the capstone piece of wisdom for this entire series. It changes everything.
Okay, so let's define them very, very clearly. A finite game.
A finite game is played for one reason: to win. It has clear rules, clear boundaries, and a definite end. The second the game is won, the match is over, the certificate is on the wall, the game stops. The whole point is to end the game by winning.
And an infinite game.
An infinite game is played for the sole purpose of continuing the play. There is no finish line. The players actually change the rules as they go to make sure the game can last forever. Think about things like friendship or culture or personal growth. You don't win a friendship and then it's over.
You don't win your career. You sustain it, you deepen it.
Exactly. And the most fulfilled, most successful people, the ones who last, treat their ambitions and their growth as an infinite game. That's where their endless motivation comes from.
Okay, let's apply this directly. Let's contrast the goal language. A finite goal for our learner would be:
pass the C2 exam in 18 months. It's transactional. It has an end date. Once you achieve it, the whole system you built starts to decay because its purpose is gone.
No, reframe that as an infinite pursuit.
The goal becomes, become a person who perpetually explores, applies, and enjoys the richness of the English language.
Wow. Yeah, you feel the difference immediately.
It's a totally different energy. The infinite pursuit has no ceiling. It has no endpoint. And so the arrival fallacy is impossible. The motivation shifts completely from the anxiety of will I pass to the deep satisfaction of how can I get better today? How can I find more beauty in this today?
So the goal is no longer to build the perfect building and then just admire it. The goal is to become the kind of person who is always building.
Always climbing, always seeking that next plateau, but knowing that plateau is just a new place to start from.
The structure itself becomes a process, not a final product. And that's where the huge identity shift happens. You've said this is the most critical takeaway of the whole series.
I believe it is. Let's really hammer this home. In the finite view, all the daily practice, the struggles, it's all just a chore. It's a means to a distant end. I suffer now so I can be happy later.
But in the infinite game,
That whole separation just dissolves. The daily act of practicing, the challenge, the tiny feeling of growth, the struggle to get a sentence right, that is the end. The reward is the game itself, not some medal in the future.
The reward is the practice.
The reward is the practice. And if that's true, your identity has to shift. You stop being someone who achieves goals, which is transactional and depends on what other people think.
And you become
someone who embodies a process of growth, which is an existential state. It's internal. It's who you are, not what you've done.
That's the difference between the people who have one big success and burn out and the people who sustain mastery for decades.
The latter group has fused the process with their identity. They don't just have a growth mindset. They are growth.
And once you embody that, your whole view of this architecture changes one last time. It's not a static monument to a past victory anymore.
No. It becomes a self-renovating structure.
Constantly being improved, expanded, reimagined for your whole life.
It's a living project. You are your own eternal student, and the architecture is designed for infinite improvement. The motivation can't die because the project is, by design, never finished.
That's it. That's the highest level. When building the architecture and the act of constantly renovating it become the same thing as just being you, you're not building anymore. You're just a builder. And with that, we conclude our 3-part architectural journey. This has been an ambitious deep dive. We hope it's been a deeply rewarding one.
It's been a pleasure. We started with the blueprint in part 1, really defining the why. Then we moved to the construction in part 2, the nuts and bolts of habits and systems.
And today, in part 3, we focused on making it last, making the structure a living, breathing part of an ecosystem through social scaffolding, through anti-fragility, and grounding the whole thing in the philosophy of the infinite game.
The one core insight we really hope lands for you is that this architecture of achievement isn't a to-do list you finish. It's a dynamic, living framework for a future of continuous becoming.
It's not about reaching some destination where you finally get to stop working. It's about getting to a point where the work itself is the reward.
It's our real hope that this series hasn't just given you some new tools, but that it's fundamentally shifted how you see what it means to learn, to grow, and to achieve. The real power isn't in staring at a distant finish line. It's in mastering the art of the journey.
For our final provocative thought, we want to invite you to do one last piece of work, to do some deep reflection. We want you to tell us the single biggest lesson you're taking away from all this.
So here's the question to really mull over. After going through this entire 3-part series, Blueprint, Engineering, and Ecosystem, what is the single most profound shift in perspective you will carry forward in your own architecture of achievement?
Is it about your identity, your process, your support system? That final act of introspection is what really cements the learning. Thank you so much for your focus and your commitment throughout this series.
It has been a real privilege to build this framework with you. Until next time, keep building, not just your goals, but yourselves.